sometimes life feels really good and I'm in flow, and sometimes it's not. What's the missing ingredient? And it became clear to me that there was this idea of values, things that matter to us, things that were important. 3 values is optimal, and maybe even create a hierarchy of values. It's a real surprise for employees, even if the company does properly promote the values, when the executive team makes decisions based on financial metrics, not the values.
Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Brad, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Andrea, thank you so much.
Brad, you have a background in resilience and values-driven leadership. You have your own podcast, and you also directed the documentary Waves of Freedom. Your new book, Start with Values, suggests that values are the foundation of a fulfilling life. What was a defining moment in your life when you realized this truth?
I think it has been reaffirmed many times over the course of my life. I remember being younger and experiencing high levels of stress or distress, you would call it, going down the spiral, ending up burnt out several times. And there was misalignment in my life. There was misalignment between what I was doing and what was actually important to me. And I'm sure you've experienced this, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers have experienced this. You are living someone else's values. And sometimes it's a necessity, especially when you're younger. You don't have that much agency in the world. So, you're just trying to learn and acquire some skills and earn some cash. And along the way, you work in alignment with other people's values. But I started realizing more and more that when I acted in alignment with my own values, especially when it came to work, suddenly I started feeling this experience of, that was a great day. I was in flow for some time. I found my way to the end of the day with more energy than when I started. And I had this inkling that there was more to life than just doing what needed to be done to earn some cash to get by. And it's interesting, when you grow up in an environment of scarcity, every paycheck is a reward in itself. So you just go, wow, that's it. And then spend that money as quickly as you can and wait for the next paycheck. And many people live like that. And so along the way, I realized, sometimes life feels really good and I'm in flow, and sometimes it's not. What's the missing ingredient? And it became clear to me that there was this idea of values, things that matter to us, things that were important. I didn't have the name for them yet, but I realized that at the time in my 20s, adventure made me feel good. So maybe it was time to set off on an adventure. And that's exactly what I did in my early 30s. And then the whole idea of core values crystallized much later on. I was in a boardroom and I mentioned this concept of values to these executives. We were having a discussion about resilience. They wanted a more resilient organization. And one of them said, our values are a bunch of esoteric nonsense. You can't measure a value with a heart rate monitor. And I thought, I think you probably can. I think you can measure when someone's acting out of alignment with their values, because you start to experience stress. So the heart rate does increase. You have more cortisol, more adrenaline, and you're certainly not in flow. And that led me to really deep dive into the research and the science behind this concept of values, trying to weave together wisdom, traditions, and the latest research into a kind of cohesive model.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And would you be willing actually to even share how your own values have evolved over time? And what are the core values that are most important for you today?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my 20s, it was all about rebellion and adventure. That's what was important to me. I wanted to reinvent myself, and I moved internationally several times over the course of my life. It was about trying to break out of the mold that I had been given, the stories I'd been told about who I was and what was important. So rebellion, adventure, Then in my 30s, it started to shift more towards being calm, more towards being curious, more towards being patient. And later on in my 40s, where I am now, it shifted towards being, especially after becoming a father, it shifted towards being compassionate towards others, towards being fit, physically fit, because I realize that when I'm fit and feeling well, I'm a much better version of myself for others, and being creative. And when I'm creative, and that's always been there in the background, but being deliberately creative, creating time and space to work on creative projects, innovate, that really makes me feel fulfilled. So they definitely shifted from that rebellion and freedom all the way through to now being creative, which is a form of rebellion because you're challenging the status quo and creating something new, and really looking after well-being. That became a priority, especially as I got to my 40s.
And if we think about some of our listeners or viewers that may have a feeling or a sense that they're a bit lost on a personal level, on a professional level, how do you believe they can use their values as a compass to find more meaning and fulfillment? And where do you suggest that they start?
Wonderful question. So there are times in life when we can feel like this experience is meaningless rather than meaningful. And I've worked with many people who've discovered meaning in what they're already doing. So an example is an emergency room nurse who said, all I do is deal with really intense challenges day after day after day. And in fact, it's not the patients who are the challenge. It's the families of the patients who come into the emergency room that cause the most disruption and the most stress for the staff. After workshopping this for some time, she just reframed what she was already doing as, I am with people in their darkest moments. I'm here to serve. And she felt fulfilled just from that little cognitive shift. So sometimes we can find meaning in what we're already doing just by looking to what is it that we are performing in this world? What is the service? How are we helping others? And you can often find some meaning there. But I also encourage people to get really clear about what's important to them. And that's what my book, Start with Values, is all about. It's a process for discovering or uncovering your core values and then building habits that bring those values to life. We might not be able to change everything all at once. Okay, I might say, you know what, Andrea, I want to write fiction novels, which I do. But if I just quit all of this work that I'm doing in the world and start writing fiction novels, well, we might not be able to pay the mortgage or buy food. So sometimes it's small changes in the right direction that end up having a cumulative impact. So if I just get clear, you know what, one of my real core values is volunteering. I really want to be there to volunteer. I don't have to change my entire career, but I could dedicate 1 hour per week to supporting others at a not-for-profit. And suddenly that 1 hour per week increases my sense of fulfillment. Life is suddenly more worthwhile, more meaningful. Or it might be, I value peace. Okay, can I spend 5 minutes each morning meditating or practicing some breath work? What was I going to do otherwise? Probably scroll a feed or something like that. So now I'm deliberately crafting some habits and embedding them in my routine. And I start to experience what I call in the book micro fulfillment. These moments where I stop and just look around and go, life is meaningful. That was a good experience. And imagine building a whole web of those types of habits into our routine. The ultimate outcome is, okay, I might be working in a job that doesn't align with my values, but I've got all of these supportive habits. I'm taking action every single day, and I'm finding these glimmers or moments of, whatever it might be, moments that fulfill me. And this becomes part of my life. And basically, I say, if you build an identity around it, so I am a calm person, then you build the habits step by step. Eventually, you are a calm person. And that might be exactly what you needed to be in order to get that dream career or start your side project or whatever it is. So start with what is most important to you, and then build that up as a habit.
And talking about building things up, in your book, you talk about the values pyramid. Can you share a little bit more about that for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many different frameworks when it comes to core values. I'm not an academic. I'm very practical, and I love philosophy and I love research. Um, and I was looking at the different frameworks and wondering, well, how can we incorporate the survival layer into our values? Because many of the frameworks kind of exclude the fact that under pressure, we revert to survival values. For example, in the midst of a disaster, we might not be valuing awe or gratitude. It might be that we just literally want to survive. So the survival layer is always there. And when our survival needs are not being met, they will short circuit our higher level values. And that's natural and normal, and it should be that way. For example, if someone loses their job, okay, maybe they're not going to be doing that volunteering for a while because they actually just need to focus on securing their own survival. So the base layer of the pyramid, much like Maslow's hierarchy, is survival. Then the next layer up is about belonging, because as a social species, we really do need to feel connected to a group. Now, some people might say, I don't need people, I'm a hermit and I live on a mountain, fantastic. But for the most part, the majority of us actually need that sense of belonging to next up the pyramid is growth, and that's all about practice. What can we master? New skills that we can learn. How can we build ourselves up to be the best version that we can be? And most humans have that curiosity and that creativity, and they want to learn and grow. It's an important part of life. The next layer up is impact, because at a certain point, when you've mastered some skills and you're adding value to your community or to the world, you want to be recognized for it. You want to be compensated fairly. You want to perhaps get some status. You want to be given a job title that reflects your competency. That's natural for humans as well. One of the problems is when people go from, I'm an 18-year-old out there in the world and I want to be recognized as an influencer and have a million followers. It's interesting that the most popular career choice for young people nowadays is they want to be an influencer. And we get up to that impact level, but generally it's after doing some practice and learning some new skills. So you've got survival, belonging, impact, survival, belonging, growth, impact, and at the top is fulfillment. Because at a certain point in life, those fulfillment values start to become really important. Being able to stop and look around and say, this journey was worthwhile. And most people, we find when they reach a certain level of success, especially that material success, they actually start asking the question, well, how can I serve others? You see this with billionaire philanthropists. It wasn't about the money after all. It's about how they give it back. And we don't have to be billionaires to find that kind of fulfillment. It might just be in nurturing other people's talents or giving back to the community or doing something for our families. So that's the values pyramid in a nutshell.
I want to now explore with you a study that I was looking at from a couple of years ago that was looking primarily at North American organizations and the values that they were stating on their website or that were communicated internally within the organization. And then what the researchers did is that they started asking employees to what extent the values that were presented as being super important for the company, were the executives within the company actually following and living and breathing those values. And what the research had found that I thought was really, really interesting is that none of the organizations that were surveyed, and again, we're talking about a large amount of companies, none of them actually lived and breathed the values that they were putting on the wall. And it indicated this huge disconnect that exists within the corporate world that we could potentially even tie to the low engagement that we see within companies today, where many employees are losing the sense of meaning or motivation in whatever roles they may play. I was curious to get your views on where do you believe we have gone wrong within the cultural space within organizations, and what advice would you have for leaders who really want to create a positive impact and bring back the true values and living, encouraging everyone to live by those values?
Most companies' stated values are actually ideals. They're not values because the employees don't know what they are, firstly. Often it's a long list, it's 8 or 9 ideals, and the executive team don't use them to make decisions. So it's just something nice to have. It's almost a little bit cliche. It's, I'm going to start a company. So what's my vision? What's my mission? What's my purpose? And what's my values? And you just, well, nowadays you just type it into ChatGPT and you'll get something and you put it on the wall, you get it printed and it means nothing. But many companies have gone down that path inadvertently. I think their intention is, yeah, of course, we want to build a culture of teamwork and innovation and courage. Fantastic. We'll put those on vinyl stickers and print them out and put them on the walls. But nobody knows what they are or how to live them. And that's the problem. And it's a real surprise for employees, even if the company does properly promote the values, when the executive team makes decisions based on financial metrics, not the values. So people don't trust the executive team. And in fact, they think that they roll their eyes when they hear about things like values. So it can be created in a different way. And this is what I've been trying to do with organizations is there's 2 approaches. One is to say, okay, fine, you've set some values. Do they really reflect how you want to operate in the world? Because they're at your core. Be authentic. If financial performance is really important to you, and it is for most organizations, if financial performance is really important to you, be upfront about it. Say growth is one of our values, or say financial stability is one of our values. Then it won't be a surprise when you make decisions based purely on financial performance, which is a reality for many organizations. Unless you're a not-for-profit, then maybe it's about service, but it's probably also at some point going to be about securing donor funding because that's important to us. So making sure that that's explicit, I think, is important. Then really looking at how are the leadership team going to walk the talk? Are they prepared to model teamwork and courage and innovation or whatever it is that is important to your organization? Because if they're not on board, then there's no point. You may as well just have a purpose and hopefully you're aligned on that. So the other path is to co-create the values with your team. And I've got a tool called the Values Assessment, which organizations have used to discover what are the real values across our organization. Now, this gets interesting. And there was a German tech firm that I worked with, and we discovered that the top 3 values were harmony, flexibility, and kindness. I mean, they had no idea that their people valued that, as opposed to their core values, which were all about, performance and building technology. So with that in mind, they adjusted their stated corporate values and they implemented practices to support them. So they said, okay, if flexibility is so important to you, let's make it a rule that anyone can work anywhere, flexible working arrangements, which they didn't have before. If harmony is so important to us as an organization, because an organization is a collection of people at the end of the day, then let's train people in nonviolent communication so we can create a more harmonious environment. Let's develop our empathy as a skill set. And suddenly people were really engaged, as you said, because the culture reflected what was most important. Now, of course, if you're a startup, you might have values all around innovation. And if we're really clear about it and we hire people who are in it for, they're willing to sacrifice their well-being to work 20-hour days, great. At least we're clear about it. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone. So being quite deliberate about selecting values that represent who it is that you are as an organization and where you want to go, and then equipping people with skills so that they can actually live these values. I've done this with another organization recently where, for example, one of the values is be bold. Okay, so we're going to be bold. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean that I stand up in a meeting and just shout? Of course not. It's about learning how to have your say, learning how to be a pioneer, learning how to create space for flow state, which is when we come up with perhaps more interesting ideas, aligning our skills to the challenge, and equipping the team with tangible tools so that they can bring this value to life. But a huge part of projects like that is getting leaders to understand how to measure values alignment, how to integrate it into performance reviews or into weekly updates, and really creating that common language and framework for living values in the organization. So it requires a bit more work, but that's how you build a high trust, highly engaged culture. And sometimes people say, oh, all we need in an organization is, for example, resilience or well-being, or we'll just get a consultant to come in and talk about whatever it might be. When the reality is, if you can create a strong, aligned, values-based culture, you will achieve the performance metrics most of the time. Of course, there are external factors there as well. But that's the difference between just having vinyl stickers on the wall and actually bringing values to life.
I love that. And since you spoke earlier about the reality that some organizations actually have too many values on their walls that
Mm-hmm.
actually are, in fact, ideals, can an individual have too many values as well? And what is the optimum number of values, both for an individual and an organization, in your view?
It's true. And I have met people who will say to me, well, my core values are, and they can list the top three, and then it starts to get a bit hazy. Hold on. Was it, care, or was it compassion, or hold on, what was the fifth one? In my book, I get very clear about the fact that 3 values is optimal. And 3 is a number that's very easy to remember. Brene Brown, in her work on vulnerability, suggests 2 core values, but that might not give people enough flexibility, although I really respect her work, and that's another approach, and there are many approaches. But I think 3 gives you enough flexibility so that you can look at situations using your values as a lens. So you can say, okay, in the situation right now, can I be creative? Can I be kind? Or can I be fit? And often you'll find an answer through your values, and that will help you shape your subsequent behavior. So I would say 3. There's a reason why most children's stories have 3 witches, 3 bears, 3 princes, or whatever it might be. 3 is the magic number in terms of being able to remember. So I would say it's great to discover a lot of things that you actually value, but then can you filter it down to 3 and maybe even create a hierarchy of values so you're quite clear if well-being is most important for you, and now you've been asked to have a late night meeting at 10 p.m. and you don't want to do that. You're so clear about your value of well-being over values of perhaps wealth and respect. You're so clear about the fact that you value well-being that you can say no, because that doesn't serve you. And you can be quite clear about it to those who have requested that 10 p.m. meeting. You can say, my value of well-being is so important to me that I'm going to have to compassionately and kindly say no to this meeting. But if you can record it, I'll provide some feedback for you tomorrow and I'll read it when I wake up. Your level of distress is going to be reduced because you're acting in alignment with your values. You may even feel a sense of relief, and they're going to trust you more and respect you more than if you turned up to that meeting with your arms crossed, angry look on your face, resenting the experience. So 3 values I would say is optimal.
And I fully agree with everything you have shared. It becomes overwhelming. And indeed, if I just think about organizations that I've had the opportunity to work with as well, I often ask leaders or people working within the company if they cannot actually remember the values, right? Then there's room for improvement. So it applies as much for cultures and individuals. So thank you for bringing that to the surface.
Of course.
And since you've spoken about well-being just now, I want to now dive into the topic of resilience, which which I also understand you've spent years studying. What do you believe is the link between resilience and joy from your perspective?
Oh, lovely question. I think that if we're managing to navigate life's ups and downs with resilience, we will find that there are more opportunities to experience joy. So, we did some research at the Resilience Institute where we surveyed 26,000 people from around the world to try and understand what the most important skills or factors are supporting the most resilient people. And it was really profound to see how this has changed over the past decade or so. It used to be all about bounce, navigate adversity, focus on what matters. But in 2023, we found that the number one factor was fulfillment. And that influenced my work on values because I thought, well, how can we build a more fulfilling life? But part of that fulfillment is joy, finding joy in what we're doing, joy in the fact that we're leading this life, that we are on the right path. And interestingly, the other factors that were most important were sleep quality, were bounce, focus, and relaxation. So there's a very real balance there between performance factors, bounce and focus, and care factors such as sleep and relaxation, with fulfillment or the sense of enjoying your life being most important. It's almost an outcome of resilience training. I think joy is such a powerful concept. And how often do we create the space to experience that, create the conditions to experience joy? So I know personally in my own life, I run every evening up this small mountain in the city where I live in New Zealand. And it's not easy. It actually requires resilience, even though I've done it maybe thousands of times. But when I get to the top and I time it just for sunset, I experience joy. I experience awe. I experience peace all at once, and gratitude for the journey. They're all interwoven in this experience. And I'm never disappointed. I never regret that it was difficult to get up there. And nowadays I do it twice because I've built up enough physical fitness that, I may as well go again. The mountain's not going to grow any taller, but I can just do it twice. And even that brings with it a sense of joy because I am matching my skills to the challenge and I'm finding flow state. Sometimes I don't even realize I'm running up those stairs. And at the end of it, there's a journey, there's a reward. So I think that resilience enables more joy because we are managing to overcome those obstacles that otherwise might just knock us back and we may give up. And many people do. They don't have a growth mindset. At the first sign of adversity or the first sign of criticism, they give up and just say, you know what, that project, that book that I was working on, or that project that I was trying to start, I'm not good enough and I'm going to give up. Resilience asks you to challenge that, and that will lead to more moments of joy. I'm interested in if that aligns with your perspective.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So thank you for sharing. And this brings me to the next question that relates to joy. If there would actually be a recipe for joy, what would be the three main ingredients in your view?
Oh, I love that. Okay, the three main ingredients. I would say calm. Calm is foundational because in our busy, hyper-connected world, there is more information competing for our fragile attention than ever before in history. So as a result of that, we're going to be activating fight, flight, freeze responses more and more and more over the course of every day, every week, every month, every year, and our lives. And that's okay, as long as we can fact check whether these fight, flight responses, which manifest as anxiety, worry, rumination, sadness, and so forth, as long as we can fact check, is this emotional state what I need right now? Or is it caused by an algorithm where I saw a post that was deliberately placed there to capture my attention, the attention economy? So being deliberate about that and being able to establish calm. What I recommend to everyone in resilience is make calm your baseline. Not you need to tactically calm yourself. because you're always in fight flight mode, but that is the beginning point for many people. It's like, at least just learn to create a few spaces of calm in your routine. No, let's practice calm so much that I become a calm person. So the first ingredient I would say is calm. The second ingredient I would say is values. Be clear about what's most important to you so that you can align your actions with your values. And three is resilience. How can you navigate challenges and adversity and not give up and keep on moving in the right direction, even if it's in tiny increments? And perhaps that leads to joy as an outcome.
Amazing. And would you be willing to share one important lesson that you have learned from someone else that has crossed your path, that completely changed your understanding of what is most important in life?
So I spent a few years on the road, writing for travel magazines, working as a digital nomad. I had read the book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek, several years before, and I decided that's what I was going to do. After I had hit a massive burnout, I was running a digital agency. I sold everything, bought a one-way ticket, and traveled to places generally where it was quite cheap to live, but where I could stop and discover what it was that was most important to me and do some productive work. And one of my assignments was to cover the surfers of Bangladesh. So as I always did, I met a translator online. He have no idea what to expect. I landed in Dhaka in Bangladesh, caught another plane to a small town called Cox's Bazar. It's actually one of the longest beaches in the world, because I'd read on an internet forum that there was a small surf community, and I thought this will make a great story. And the magazine editor said, okay, go for it. These assignments hardly paid for the travel cost, but I was in a state where I was just curious, and I wanted to go and explore the world. So I got there and I met the surfers of Bangladesh. And one of the surfers, his name was Jafar. He said, but you probably should meet our best surfer. Her name is Nasima. And I thought, Nasima? Now, it's a very conservative culture. You don't really even see women out and about that much. Never mind surfing. So I said, how do I meet her? May or may not be possible. Anyway, on my last day in Bangladesh, I got to meet Nasima. We were sitting on the beach and she told me her story. So she had been homeless, aged 6 years old. Her family couldn't afford her. They said to her, you've got two options, either leave or become a prostitute. And you see real poverty there. It's just, it's incomprehensible sometimes when you see how poor people can be. And so she left, and she was homeless, and she was living on the beach. She was selling seashells to tourists. And one day, an intrepid Australian surfer girl passed through town and went surfing. She saw this and said, I want to do that. I've never seen someone dance on the water. And as a result, she went down the beach, found the boys who had a surfboard. It had been left there by a missionary several years before, and she started surfing. But at a certain point, the boys and the local community said, no more surfing, it's not for girls. And she was devastated. This was the one thing in her life that she actually enjoyed. So she went and knocked on the door of Jafar, who looked after the board, and she asked him, can I use it at night? And so she started surfing at night. And she surfed and surfed and surfed at night until the big day of Bangladesh's first surf competition. All the boys lined up along the beach, and she said, I want to compete. And they laughed. They thought she was going to be terrible at it. So they said, why not? She won. She was by far the best surfer in Bangladesh because she had been practicing without vision. She was so attuned to her position on the wave, and she was graceful. And so they said, okay, maybe you can surf, but wear appropriate gear. The challenges didn't end there. The community said again, you can't surf. It's not for girls. Then she got married because she thought maybe having a husband will enable her to surf more, but her husband was quite protective and he was always hanging around, and he didn't really like the fact that she was surfing. And her husband's family said that her skin was too dark because she spent all this time in the sun. Really challenging story. But nevertheless, she did what she loves, and she started mentoring a small group of surfer girls. And it is just incredible to see this microculture that they built and how much joy they get from a few moments out there amongst the waves whenever they can. And yeah, she mentored this small group of surfer girls in Bangladesh. She had a real impact on me because she teaches you bounce, like navigating real adversity, even homelessness, practice, 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 that growth, even when it's difficult, surfing at night. She teaches that sense of belonging, going down there, saying, I want to be part of this. And it's all to find a few moments of joy in an otherwise challenging world. So she made a real impact on me.
What a beautiful story. Wow. And since you've spoken about surfing, you have directed an incredible documentary that I've watched that is really, really profound and allows us to discover the power of surf therapy. Tell us more about the journey of creating that movie, and was the experience in Bangladesh the spark that led you to want to create the movie, or was it something else?
So I've been surfing since I was about 6 years old, and I not always consistently, but at least as a teenager, it was very consistent. And then ultimately, I started designing my life around surfing, except for when I lived in London. Although I would go down and crunch my way across the ice from time to time and go surfing in England. Uh, so surfing has always been a place of peace and solace. And no matter what was going on in my life, it was always the happy place. And I started wondering early on, could surfing be an effective intervention for mental health? And then there was this fantastic documentary on Netflix about veterans returning from war zones, and they were using surf therapy to get them off of all kinds of prescription medication for PTSD. And this movie just, I mean, I found it to be mind blowing how powerful surfing was at helping people. There were veterans with no arms and legs, just being out there in the water, smiling, shrieking with joy, having so much fun. So I started investigating this idea of surf therapy. I was amazed that this already existed. And I found a surf therapy program about a kilometer down the road from where I live in New Zealand. And so I reached out, contacted them, and the founder, her name is Krista Davis. I still do work with them to this day. I'm taking their team through resilience training in a couple of weeks. But I said, hey, I would love to record what you do. It's incredible. Now, in my mind, I was thinking of a 7 or 8 minute short film. And she said, oh, that sounds amazing. Let's make a documentary. I said, yeah, let's do it. And somehow or other, it just ended up being that we recorded so much footage that it was never going to be 7 minutes. It was going to be an hour-long, full-length documentary. So the process for it evolved quite organically. I said, I want to just film what you do down at the beach. But her program is much more than just taking people surfing. So the participants in the program are young men from a Maori background. They've been in the justice system or they've been in trouble, and they use surf therapy as one option for rehabilitation or to reintegrate them into the community after whatever kind of trouble they've been in. And it's just so interesting to see these young guys who've come from backgrounds of abuse. Often there's been physical abuse, a lot of drugs, a lot of jail time. And at the beginning, they're really serious and shy and awkward. But gradually, over the course of 8 to 12 weeks, they start coming out of their shell. And there's so much more to it than just the surfing, although that's kind of like the pinnacle of the whole 12-week experience. But Krista also takes them and helps them get driver's licenses, and she would wake them up because often, it's a Friday morning. Let's go to surf therapy. They've had a big night on Thursday night, and she has no judgment whatsoever. This is what I love about that program. She says, I don't care what you've done. You can always move forward. Like, we'll pick you up and there's going to be a nice meal and you're going to go for a dip in the ocean and you'll feel better afterwards. And they're like, I don't want it. And she's knocking on their door in like some gang neighborhood. Like, no, you're getting up. And so I just followed these stories. And then we got people together in rooms and we interviewed them one on one, and we mashed it all together. We discovered there were two key stories: the story of Jared becoming the most the primary story in the documentary. And do you want to know something crazy?
Yes.
So Jared ended up working for the charity, for the surf therapy program. It's called Live for More. And he ended up marrying Krista, and they've now got two kids.
Oh, wow.
It's just an
How
incredible,
incredible. Wow, I
yeah.
love it.
So the documentary was, talk about fulfillment. When I look back, it wasn't easy. I have to say, you're running. I was at such a busy point in my Resilience Institute career, yet making a little bit of time on the Friday to go down there, film them in the ocean, go back, film some interviews, watch the progress, see these young men, start making progress, and then suddenly making some mistakes and slip ups and going back down to rock bottom, gradually climbing their way back up again. And some of them now have fantastic careers. They have completely turned their lives around. They're ambassadors for not just surf therapy, but just for the fact that you can transform yourself at any point in life, moving from being gang members to being, church leaders and things like that. It's really, it's a fantastic program. So I loved making that documentary. It also got me back into photography and videography, which I've always loved. Buying a water housing, being in the ocean, filming people. It's so much fun.
So happy you had a beautiful journey, and it's reflected through the documentary. You feel the, as I said, the transformation and the positive impact. And you would think that the dark spot where some of those young individuals started, that it's just so hard to climb back up, right, to the surface, to be able to see the awe of life, of being alive, right. And it was just like so inspiring to see the power of such programs that really allow us to just live again, right. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just incredible. So thank you so much for sharing. I know that for those listening today that may be curious to see your documentary, it's available on YouTube, correct?
It is available on YouTube. If you search for Waves of Freedom, you'll find it. Waves of Freedom documentary. Yeah, it's there for free on YouTube. And if anyone really enjoys it, please feel free to visit the Live for More website and donate if you wish, or just share it with someone that you think will enjoy it.
I was thinking now if we could actually plant one seed or one value in someone's mind that would really create this ripple effect of positivity in our world, what would that one thought or one value be according to you, and why?
I think that care is powerful because it is for each other, but it also goes beyond. And in my book, I talk about sustainability being a value that we should all share, because we do have just this one planet. And I love the pale blue dot idea, that photograph of Earth from space, and you just see this blue dot floating in the vastness of space. We often think of the solar system as being, this big sun in the middle, and then these big balls, these planets with orbit rings drawn around them. It's not like that at all. There are vast distances. We're out there, this anomaly in space, in the Goldilocks zone, where it's not too hot and it's not too cold, and we've got liquid water and oxygen. How can we protect this place, look after it, and just make sure that our kids and their children and maybe 7 generations will get to see and the wonder of this place. I've been fortunate enough to go to coral reefs, and I've seen those that are vibrant and alive, and I've seen those that are dead and bleached. Like, how can we just be a little bit more caring for ourselves, our thoughts, our bodies, caring towards each other, How are other people doing? Activate that empathy portal. How can I serve? And for our planet.
I love that. It's so essential. Focusing on, yes, planetary sustainability and also human sustainability. It's so essential and so interlinked indeed, as you've shared. So, as a final question, if you could leave our listeners with some final words of wisdom about joy, resilience, and values, what would you say?
I would say when it comes to any change, and most of us want to change something about ourselves, there's always, a bad habit that we can audit or change or unravel. I'd say start really small, because adding pressure to yourself is probably not going to help. 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by February because they're just too big. So start small, be playful, and just do something that brings you a little bit of joy. I think that's how I'd like to finish off.
Amazing. Brad, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Andrea, thank you so much, and thank you all.